As China steps up military activity in the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan is building up a resistance in the hopes of deterring conflict and defending itself. Tensions ratcheted up in August when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the island, which China claimed was a provocation. In a new CBS Reports documentary, correspondent Adam Yamaguchi shows us the reactions of Taiwanese people on the ground. He also spoke to Speaker Pelosi about her trip.
It's been rumored for the last week or so that Speaker Nancy Pelosi was on her way to Taiwan. And the Taipei 101 seems to just be confirming what we've all thought could be happening.
Speaker Pelosi has a history criticizing Chinese policy and its record on human rights. She's met with the Dalai Lama, whom China had exiled from Tibet, and supported Hong Kong's mass protests against China's overreach. In 1991, she also unfurled a banner in Tiananmen Square in memory of Chinese democracy activists massacred during the 1989 anti-government protests.
So look at that. All that media waiting out at the driveway of the hotel gives you a sense of how big a deal this is.
I'm curious, what did you accomplish on this trip?
In terms of Taiwan, of course, we have common security interests. We have strong economic ties, and we're big admirers of the democracy in Taiwan. We were not going to allow Taiwan to be isolated because of the president of China. That was just never going to happen.
CBS Reports executive producer Adam Yamaguchi is with us now to talk more about the making of this documentary. So, Adam, how are the Taiwanese responding in the face of increasing aggression from China?
Yeah, so civic groups in Taiwan have been closely watching how the Ukrainians have stepped up in defense of their country, and they're hoping to do much the same, either through tactical training courses or first responder training. They want to build a strong civilian resistance in the hopes that this would make an invasion by China a little less likely. The military has also been studying Ukraine's asymmetric warfare successes, and there's talk of lengthening conscription from 4 months to a year, shifting some of its weapons purchases to favor some of the lighter shoulder-mounted weapons that have been so effective in Ukraine. In spite of the saber rattling, like flying fighter jets in the Taiwan Strait, China doesn't necessarily want to use force. Although Xi Jinping hasn't ruled it out, the strategy in China seems to be more aligned with this ethos of win without fighting. So China engages in economic coercion and propaganda, and it's all meant to try to chip away at Taiwan's resistance to unifying with China. But the more China pushes, it seems that the more the Taiwanese seem to resist. All these activities are seeming to harden Taiwanese identity and their embrace of its democracy, which at this point almost seems like it's hardwired into the DNA of the Taiwanese people. So again, the more China pushes, it seems it may have the opposite of the intended effect.
So it just so happened that you were actually filming this documentary when Nancy Pelosi arrived in August. We were able to get you on the stream, actually, at one point to talk about what it was like on the ground there. I'm glad you asked her about what she accomplished, because I know the conversation here was about that, was about, okay, showing sort of support, a show of support, is that enough for Taiwan? And is this going to become now a litmus test for other American lawmakers to go over there to prove that they can stand up to China? And in fact, what happened is other lawmakers did go.
That's right.
So that's what the conversation that was happening here in the U.S. But what about in Taiwan? How did the Taiwanese react to her arrival?
Yeah, so, leading up to and after the arrival, there were, as you saw from the clip, there were a handful of protesters who demanded that the U.S. stop meddling in what it considers to be Chinese affairs. For the most part, what we found was that people were very, very grateful for the visit because it signaled strong support from arguably Taiwan's most important ally and effective guarantor of security. But as you mentioned, I mean, there was a mix of feelings as to whether this show of friendship really went much further beyond just being symbolism. Mm-hmm. One thing that we heard from many on the ground was, well, how is China going to react? Pelosi's here today; she'll be gone tomorrow. What happens the next day when China decides that it wants to bully us or take its anger and frustration towards the U.S. out on us? It banned the import of various agricultural products. This is a form of economic punishment that China is not afraid to use against against Taiwan. And it also staged an unprecedented series of military drills in and around Taiwan, much more aggressive, if you will, than it normally does. So the Taiwanese have felt the brunt of this. But again, I think that they are very keenly aware that the U.S. even symbolic measures are important to ensuring that China cannot bully its way around or force Taiwan into further isolation.
So, did Speaker Pelosi have anything to say about China's escalations after her arrival?
Yeah, so she rejected the notion that her trip helped inflame an already tense situation. She said that China simply used her trip as an excuse or as a pretext to establish a new norm of activity and military aggression that it would have done anyway. She also emphasized that Beijing cannot be allowed to intimidate or threaten Taiwan. And in fact, many in Congress agreed. This was one of the very few shows of bipartisan support that we've seen in recent times. Many members of Congress were actively and vocal about their support for this trip.
We led into this talking about a buildup of, I guess, some military aid or whatever. But we were talking earlier, and the thing with Taiwan is that because it's an island, you would have to attack it to sort of shut it down. I'm wondering if you heard any talk, preparations, planning for, an economic blockade, which could be just as debilitating.
Right. There is always that concern. As I mentioned earlier, economic punishment is one of the things that China is not afraid to use against Taiwan. Taiwan and China have robust economic ties, and in many ways, if we look at China as being the electronics manufacturer of the world, a lot of the most advanced semiconductors that go into those electronics, consumer electronics, military equipment actually come from Taiwan. So there's a real intertwining of the economies. So while China again banned, let's say, the import of agricultural products, how far they are willing to go to not only hurt the Taiwanese economy and hurt its own economy is sort of questionable. One thing that we saw in the military activities shortly after Speaker Pelosi's visit was we saw a number of Chinese warships encircling Taiwan, and that was read by many in security circles as being almost a sort of a dress rehearsal for what an economic blockade might look like if tensions were ratcheted up even further.
Interesting stuff, Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you can stream the new CBS Reports documentary Defending Taiwan tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News. And you can also watch it anytime on the free CBS News app and Paramount Plus.